morning and welcome back to the lecture series on partition of India in print media and cinema. We are talking about partition literature in the 21st century. So, how partition scholarship has emerged over the decades is something we need to understand towards the end of this course. So, Kavita Daya notes that 1947 partition experience of gendered violence and displacement shapes the contemporary ethnic nationalisms which prevail in the transnational South Asian political life today. So, partition as a reality has never gone away since the 1940s. It keeps looming in the South Asian politics, in the gendered politics, communal politics, in the ensuing communal riots that South Asia has witnessed, in ethnic violence, and through the question of refugee crisis that keeps popping up, that keeps popping up from time to time, and a crisis that amplifies and never, a crisis that has never gone away, human crisis, the question of citizenship, who is the citizen, who is the outsider, and the border lines that that construct and deconstruct an individual's identity, dimensions of an individual's identity. All these things trace back their roots to the decision of partition, the watershed. The partition constitutes a field of transformation and a discourse that became the condition of possibility for the gendered ethnicization of citizenship and belonging in post-colonial South Asia. So, in the post-colonial nation states in South Asia, a person, an individual is produced as a citizen, a foreigner, a refugee, an immigrant through this decision made in 1947. So, an individual's identity and belonging is to a large extent etched by the partition. Urvashi Butalia notes that there is no institutional memory of partition in India like we have in the case of the Holocaust in Germany, or even the memorials for the Vietnam War. We do not have anything corresponding to such memorials in India. Anything that commemorates or remembers partition in an institutional manner. However, having said that, we must also consider that formal historiography, official historiography has its own way of remembering and documenting the past. There is no denying that once a discursive past is museumized, it is at the behest of some canonical works, some works that are given more importance at the expense of relegating other works at the backgrounds. They are treated as lesser important, lesser important materials which make up the archive of partition. Early work on colonial and post-colonial history and on partition primarily documented the consolidation of empire and the transfer of power basically. These accounts largely centered and they limited themselves to the narrative on the transfer of power that occurred in 1947. And the protagonists shown in this entire discourse were the more prominent leaders, nationalist elites such as Jawaharlal Nehru, his father Motilal Nehru, M.K. Gandhi, M.A. Jinnah, and therefore look at the, I mean their focus, these studies focus is mostly the regional rather than the urban or national impact of violence. So, in the case of the revisionist works on partition, the focus has actually been on or the in the revisionist works, the trend, the focus has primarily two different directions been emphasized. The translation into English of regional artworks such as works in Hindi or works originally in Hindi, Urdu, Punjabi and Bengali about the partition experience has resulted in broadening the audience, broadening the readership for a range of these artworks. There is also a lot of Indian writings in English which have dealt with the episode of partition. We have Anita Desai's Clear Light of the Day as a case in hand, and many such works which are originally written in English, and such a work basically is exposed to a wide range of readers. So, they are made available to a larger number of audience who are interested in partition scholarship, and two of the important critics that that have contributed significantly in this regard are Mushirul Hasan and Alok Bhalla, right, among many others of course. So, we see that the desire to have partition literature in translation is a remarkable step towards taking the scholarship one step ahead and making it available to everyone, to scholars coming from different backgrounds who are even outside, who are even from outside of South Asia, right. For example, we have scholars like Erin O'Donnell, who has extensively worked on Ghatak's films. She has written on Ghatak's films. We have Shelley Feldman, who has studied the case of Bengal partition. We have film critics like Thomas Stubblefield that has examined, that has studied Ghatak's works. So, a lot of scholars from the West are have become interested on this topic thanks to translation or films being made available with subtitles, right. So, feminist and subaltern studies research has focused on recording the oral testimonies, the survivors' witness, and this is much similar to that of the Holocaust survivors, and this gives this renders voice, this this expedition by spearheaded by scholars such as Urvashi Butalia, Ritu Menon, Kamla Bhasin, Nandi Bhatia, Anjali Gereroy, we have and then Gyanendra Pandey. They have been writing about the importance of rendering voice and breaking the silences that have remained in the histories and in the memories vis-a-vis partition. So, the gaps need to be further explored and examined and reinvestigated, especially in the case of women and ethnic minorities in India. So, in the case of I could give a small example how partition literature is far from arriving at a closure or a dead end. It has more to explore. It is still a burning topic, and there are some further milestones to be met. So, for example, in the case of Bengal, there was a point where, due to censorship, political censorship, the chapter of Morijjhapi remained obscured and under researched, not discussed. It was only scholars like Ross Malik, who were publishing with Oxbridge, Cambridge and Oxford, who were not actually situated in India, that could discuss a chapter such as Morijjhapi, not the scholars residing in India. From there on, there have been some daunting works, some daring ventures, literary ventures that have openly criticized the then governments in Bengal, and that have elaborately, vividly described the Morijjhapi experience, Morijjhapi chapter as survivors, as first hand witnesses. And further, in the first stage, such writings were in the vernacular, they were written in Bengali. From then on, from that point, today we have a work like Blood Island, written in English by a Dalit from from within the community of the Bengali Dalit refugees who witnessed and survived Morijjhapi, and who is taking the incident to the rest of the country. So Morijjhapi is no longer a regional incident of violence of human rights. It is something that has reached out to the larger audience. It has become it is available on a pan-Indian scale now. So, this is a development, this is a very positive development in the field of literary works, literary writings, where the question of literacy also becomes very important. Over the generations, over the decades, we have witnessed what can be called as the first generation literates from among the Dalits. So, the people that come to India as destitutes, as beggars, in the tail end of population exchange, and who have no profession, who have virtually no profession in the new land, their children go to schools, they become literate. Such is the case of Adhir Biswas and Manoranjan Bepari from Bengal. They are Dalit intellectuals, Dalit writers. They start writing in Bengali. There are other poets also that write about partition in Bengali. We have Kalyani Thakur Charal, we have Lili Haldar, and of course, there are some important works by Moli Manohar Biswas, Nakul Mallik, who are engaging with the topic of partition from very different angles, from very different perspectives, and new realities are emerging thereby. So, recent works actually have gained a lot through two of these things. One is a section of society starting to speak up because they have earned their literacy within the period of a generation. The Dalits write about their own experiences. Their experiences are not written by the mainstream upper caste people. and that is a very different kind of writing altogether. The language is imbued with, enmeshed with the struggle and the marginality that they come from, right. The importance of translation cannot be emphasized enough. It's a boon to have partition scholarship available in Indian English now. So, feminist and subaltern studies research has focused on recording the oral testimonies of partition survivors. Kavita Daya uses the term post-colonial public sphere, a public consciousness that is formed in the post-colonial nation, and it is formed through processes in a formerly colonized democratic society by which post-colonial subjects articulate a new framework and discourse. So, they have the post-colonial subject has the colonized democratic, formerly colonized democratic society to inform their consciousness, to shape their identity, and yet they are churning out a new framework and a new discourse that explain their everyday existence, their everyday experiences, their motivations, aspirations, actions and fantasies in the process of working towards decolonization. So, a lingering of the colonial reality and also being exposed to new ways of being, new motivations and new desires, and that is how one gets one decolonizes oneself. And the post-colonial subject, a complex subject, we have to understand that the post-colonial public sphere is not always already oppositional or subaltern. They have an agency of their own. The minor subject can still reimagine and even resist the conditions of oppression through media such as magazines, journals, newspapers, literature, films, and through internet, through social media. So, they form the counter public of the post-colonial public sphere, right. In fact, Benedict Anderson asserts that print media such as which includes novels, journals, newspaper, can very well represent the modern nation. It does very well represent the modern nation. It acts as an intermediary between the state and civil society to form a collective imagined community which the nation is, right. So, just talking in the Derridian sense, the center is constantly moving towards the margin, and the margin is constantly pushing for and striving for the center. Nothing is located in one position forever, and the media plays a great role in this dynamics, in this ever let us say shifting in this ever fluid and ever shifting dynamics. Film technology, for one, has emerged as a powerful tool in the post-colonial urban India, and it plays a great role in bridging the public and the private. So, on the one hand we have the elite, and then we have the minor, local and the national. Everything is mediated through all these different let us say realities, different cosmos, the public and the private, the elite, the minor, the local, the national, all these supposedly conventionally understood as oppositional stratas, oppositional ecosystems or realities are oppositional, these opposed spaces or cosmos are mediated through films. So, film acts as a kind of liaison, as a kind of bridge between the civil society and the state making process and citizenship, right. We see that on the one hand we have the state machinery, on the other hand we have the civil society and citizenship, which and the film technology actually plays to great extent as a liaison between the two. So, film shaped the collective memory through representing the unrecorded histories and the survivors' testimonies, through creating alternative possibilities on screen about the national history. Bollywood films have actually emphasized melodrama to a great extent and used melodrama in fact to reconfigure contemporary questions about geopolitical war and peace, the relation between ethnicity and citizenship in national culture, and has also memorialized the women's experience during partition in the transnational public sphere. Hindi cinema or Bollywood is synonymous with Hindi cinema, but not quite. If we consider the mainstream Hindi cinema, the pot boilers, popular Hindi cinema, it is an effective medium of propagation of consumer culture. It has managed to somehow retain moral conservatism with fragments of utopian ideologies and possibilities, and it has also addressed the question of commodity culture. So, the question of film being sold and taken well by the public, the glamour quotient being written, and yet trying to drive home a quick message, something that is profound, that keeps the audience thinking, while also not giving up entirely on moral conservatism, are some of the traits that inform the popular Hindi cinema. So, it is liked by the most. It tries to include the most of the audience. The very familiarity of the narrative makes it as a useful non-interfering grid within which something novel, something different can be experimented. One case in hand could be Mani Ratnam's film Dil Se, which deals with the question of nationalism, the coerciveness and violence that is involved in the preservation and in the celebration of nationhood, not addressing the human rights of certain sections that belong to the same geopolitical space. So, it is dealing with I mean the film actually tells us about a woman who belongs to an extremist outfit. She endorses an extremist outfit and she is a member of such an organization, and so we see that such a figure of a female rebellion who wants to avenge her family's killings by the military, by the Indian military forces, is contained within mainstream Bollywood formula, because in the end there is nothing radical happening in the film. However, in the end, as many critics have noted, the film do some relapses and reconciles with some conservative message. It has the film relapses to moral conservatism. It gives some conservative and straightforward messages, where the woman in the end actually dies. She is hardly shown as an agent. As a terrorist, as a female terrorist, she is through and through a victim, and she does not belong anywhere, neither to her outfit nor to the mainstream society, and she cannot even participate in her own love story, a half-hearted love story with a man who is who is a symbol of the mainstream society. He is a journalist of a military officer. So, we see such films striving for radical some utopian and radical let us say goals, or such films aiming for some radical objectives, but in the end they fall back in such a way that these works, the messages that they carry, are more acceptable to the larger public, right. So, the films are dealing with the familiar let us say repository, which is the partition, but then they are also experimenting with the question of partition, citizenship, nation and nationalism. Lalita Gopalan states that cinema is inextricably linked to our utopian imaginings. It stages the most anxious impulses of our psychic and social life. It gives us hope for a better world. So, the utopian dimension is never gone. What if, what could be? A lot of films have actually flourished, Bollywood films have flourished by exploring the question about national belonging, and through further exploiting or capitalizing the Indo-Pakistan, the topic of Indo-Pakistan war and peace. So, recent Bollywood melodramas often take up the ethnicization of citizenship that has been enabled by partition, but different films do this or approach this topic from different directions and contradictorily. Some films reify, reflect, and others problematize the manifestation of the cultural and political inscription of the Indian Muslim. For example, the Indian Muslim as the third column, as the quintessential enemy and insider outsider, and then portraying of Pakistan as the essential other and the timeless enemy of India. These are some of the topics that have been explored. Partition transformed Bombay film industry not just materially, but also in terms of the genres in Hindi cinema. This also reminds me of another film in Mani Ratnam called Roja. It came in the 1990s, where we have a very nationalist or we have a very we have the question of nationhood and war, and against the backdrop of such larger dealings, or against the backdrop of nation and war, we have a love story. At the heart of it, there is a love story, and so the couple is shaped and portrayed in a very predictable way in some sense, and the Muslim, the terrorist, Kashmiri terrorist shown in Roja is also the good man who turned bad, and a bad man who has the possibility of becoming good. So this is something, I mean, that we have recurrently seen in Bollywood films. We have similar character, the male protagonist, we have a similar character in Mission Kashmir, the male protagonist is an innocent boy who turned into a terrorist, and now he needs to be taken back into the fold, and he has some very loving women around him to inspire him become a better human being. He has a nice mother and a very understanding love interest or girlfriend. So these are some of the stereotypical based on which Bollywood films have flourished in the 1990s and at the turn of the decade. We see stock narratives about the siblings belonging to nuclear families that get separated or lost in childhood. This becomes a kind of motif, a kind of stock, this becomes a kind of theme, and we have some stock characters where traumatic experiences are these traumatic experiences actually draw on the reality of thousands of families that got separated and never successfully reunited after the partition. So, siblings belonging to different families and they getting separated or lost and later meeting after many years is a stock theme that keeps coming back in Bollywood. R.B. Chopra's film Afsana narrates the story of identical twin brothers separated from parents and from each other during the partition. Waqt, directed by Yash Chopra, talks about the three brothers that separated at the time of partition. Nasik by I.S. Johar is a social film that narrates the experiences of refugee family displaced by the partition. Then Yash Chopra's Dharmaputra is based on Acharya Chatur Sen Shastri's Hindi novel, which centers an illegitimate Muslim boy who is raised in post-partition India by Hindu parents, foster Hindu parents. By the mid 1960s, the Indian state initiated several efforts to create national cinema and provide cultural support to the socialist government. And in this regard, we cannot definitely forget the quintessential film Mother India. Mother India, where the woman is the incarnation of India, the nation, and she single-handedly, she is a powerful, compassionate and long-suffering woman with great resilience who is single-handedly bringing up her sons. So, she is like the great mother, and in the end she says something very which became a popular dialogue. She says that I can give away my son, but not the modesty of a woman, and allegedly because her son has molested this village girl, she takes the initiative to kill her own son and takes laws in her own hands, and that is how the mother figure, as nurturing as and someone who renders justice, and who in a way is in charge of warding off the social evils. So, this is something this film had become very popular. The imagination of it actually took after, or it was inspired by the imagination of the ideal Indian woman and her resilience, the range of meanings that can be accommodated within the image, within the figure of the ideal Indian woman. Film Finance Corporation, later known as National Film Development Corporation, had a crucial role in shaping national culture through cinematic production of socially progressive films, which later led to the emergence of the middle class cinema and later on, so we have this genre of the parallel cinema, which has its own target audience, a close knit smaller group of educated middle class, upper middle class audience. Since the 1990s, the politics of nationalism has become almost a regular feature in Bollywood films, even in films that are family dramas and regular pot boilers and love stories, epics about coming of age and individual growth. The Hindu social is at the heart of such narratives, and also the question of nationality and Indo-Pak relations. These topics are indexed in the plot, they are inbuilt or in the plot, or they are they have a symbolic economy, right. Farah Khan's film, which is a potboiler, a mainstream Bollywood film, Main Hoon Na, I am here for you, made in 2004, as well as Lakshya or Objective, made in the same year, and then Chandra Prakash Dwivedi's Pinjar or Skeleton, made in 2003, and even Yash Chopra's Veer Zara, made in 2005, are some of the recent films that were made in the last 20 years or so, which dealt with partition at the turn of the century. So, Main Hoon Na is considered as a box office success, and the film was criticized mainly from two standpoints: the masculinist valorization of nation state and the representation of military as problematic. So, the film critically argues for secular de-ethnicized citizenship, and it vouches for, it stands up for international peace. The film also allegorizes the popular Hindu religious epic Ramayana and the rhetoric that emerges from Ramayana. The protagonist in the film is called Ram, who is named after the Hindu god, and then the character of Ram's brother is Lakshman in the just like in the epic, and Ram is exiled from home like the god by a stepmother who rejects him because he is the illegitimate product of an extramarital affair, right. The film insists that there should be peace or aman, there should be friendship or dosti between India and Pakistan. The film optimistically ends with the national exchange of innocent prisoners on the Wagah border by India and Pakistan. The film also does not posit the Pakistani, the Afghani Taliban or the Indian Muslim as the other, the militant villain with respect to the Indian state. So, we see all in all that a new wave of cine patriotism emerges in the 1990s Bollywood cinema, which ties the filmic representation of the Muslim as terrorist to the construction of the abnormal monster in contemporary discourses of counter-terrorism, both in the West and in India. We will harp more on this, and we will look at more films that speak to this topic in our next lecture. With this, I am going to stop today's lecture, and let us meet again for another round of discussions. Thank you.